Once Hollywood's trusted face, Clifton Powell now faces a verdict that could erase decades of fame in an instant. What really happens when the system condemns a man before the truth is ever heard? Hollywood made him a trusted face. Clifton Powell, seen in over 100 films, from Friday to Ray to Menace II Society. But fame can be fragile. Overnight, allegations surfaced, false and devastating, and the industry that once celebrated him recoiled. Roles disappeared, opportunities vanished, television appearances were cut short. By the time the courts cleared his name, the damage was done. How do you rebuild a career when the world has already judged you? Can reputation survive when systemic bias and public perception collide? Powell's story is more than a fall from grace. It's a journey through betrayal, resilience, and a fight for justice. Hollywood hoped it would be forgotten. The truth refused to stay silent. The face you know but cannot name. There is a particular kind of actor in Hollywood who never becomes a household name, but whose face is instantly recognizable to millions. They appear in film after film, sometimes as the villain, sometimes as the sidekick, sometimes as the father figure or the cop or the hustler on the corner. They never carry the movie on their own, but every movie they appear in is better because they are in it. Clifton Powell was that actor. For more than 3 decades, he built a career that most performers could only dream of, not through fame or celebrity, but through sheer volume of work and undeniable talent. His breakthrough came in 1993 with Menace II Society, the gritty urban drama that captured the harsh realities of street life with unflinching honesty. Powell's performance in that film announced his arrival to Hollywood with raw energy and authenticity that could not be faked. He was not playing a character. He was channeling something real, something he understood from his own childhood in one of Washington, D.C.'s most dangerous neighborhoods. Directors noticed. Casting agents noticed. And suddenly, the man who had clawed his way out of poverty was getting calls for every project that needed someone who could bring truth to the screen. The Friday franchise made him a fan favorite. His sharp comedic timing, his ability to pivot from menacing to hilarious in a single scene, proved that Powell had range most actors could not touch. He could terrify you with a glare and make you laugh with a perfectly delivered line moments later. This versatility became his calling card, the reason directors kept bringing him back for project after project. Dead Presidents. Why Do Fools Fall in Love? Rush Hour. Next Friday. Each film added to a resume that was becoming impossible to ignore. By 2004, Powell had cemented his reputation with a performance that earned him an NEACP Image Award nomination. In Ray, the critically acclaimed biopic starring Jamie Foxx as Ray Charles, Powell played Jeff Brown, the loyal road manager who stood beside the music legend through triumph and tragedy. His nuanced performance stood alongside Foxx's Oscar-winning portrayal, proving that Powell could hold his own against the very best in the business. The nomination was not just recognition for a single role, it was validation that decades of work had mattered, that his contributions could not be dismissed or overlooked regardless of the systemic barriers he had faced throughout his career. Over 100 credits across film and television. The man Hollywood called when they needed someone unforgettable. And then, without warning, it all began to fall apart. The accusation that changed everything. The summer of 2011 started like any other for Clifton Powell. He was working, he was building, he was doing what he had done for 3 decades, showing up on set, delivering performances that directors trusted, and moving on to the next project with the quiet confidence of a man who had earned his place in the industry. His phone rang with offers, his calendar filled with commitments. The machinery of a successful career hummed along as it had for years. And then, in a single moment, everything changed. A woman using the pseudonym Keontae Myers came forward with accusations that would alter the trajectory of his entire life. According to her claims, an encounter in a hotel room in New Orleans had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. What began as consensual, she alleged, became something else entirely, too aggressive to continue. When she asked him to stop, she claimed, he ignored her request and carried on regardless. Myers, who at the time worked as a cocktail waitress at Harrah's Casino, filed a complaint that would soon spread far beyond local authorities. The accusation was serious, the accusation was specific, and the accusation was about to become very, very public. The media machinery activated with devastating efficiency. TMZ picked up the story first, running headlines that left no room for nuance, no space for context, no possibility that the accusations might not reflect reality. Other outlets followed within hours: entertainment news sites, gossip blogs, social media platforms where strangers who had never met Clifton Powell suddenly felt qualified to render judgment on his character. The headlines were brutal, the language was definitive, and the presumption of innocence that supposedly forms the foundation of the American legal system was nowhere to be found. Overnight, the actor who had made audiences laugh in Friday and moved them in Ray was being painted in an entirely different light. His name, which had taken 30 years of consistent work to build into something meaningful, was now permanently attached to one of the most serious allegations a man can face. Search results that once displayed his filmography and award nominations now surfaced accusations alongside every accomplishment. The digital record was being rewritten in real time, and Powell was powerless to stop it. From the very beginning, Powell denied the claims completely and without qualification. Through his representative, he issued a statement declaring the accusations false and announcing his intention to pursue every possible legal remedy against the woman who had made them. His denial was not hedged or carefully worded by lawyers seeking to preserve options. It was absolute. The encounter as described by Myers, he maintained, simply did not happen. He was innocent, and he would fight until the truth emerged. But Powell understood something that the public often forgets, something that anyone who has ever been accused of anything understands with painful clarity. In the court of public opinion, accusations function as verdicts. The presumption of innocence that protects defendants in courtrooms does not extend to the informal judgments rendered by strangers scrolling through headlines on their phones. Once an allegation enters public consciousness, the damage begins immediately. It does not wait for investigation. It does not pause for evidence. It does not care whether the accused is guilty or innocent. The accusation itself becomes the punishment, delivered instantly and without appeal. The criminal investigation moved forward as investigations do, gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, examining the facts with the methodical slowness that justice requires. And when that investigation concluded, the result should have ended the entire matter. The case was dismissed for lack of evidence. Read that sentence again and let it sink in. Dismissed for lack of evidence. In a functioning justice system, this outcome should have restored everything. A man was accused. The accusation was investigated by professionals trained to uncover truth. Those professionals found nothing to support the claims. Case closed. Reputation restored. Life continues. But that is not what happened. For Clifton Powell, the dismissal of criminal charges was not an ending. It was merely a transition to a different kind of nightmare. Myers pursued a civil case against Powell, seeking financial damages in excess of $75,000. Unlike criminal court, where prosecutors must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Civil cases operate on a lower standard that lawyers call preponderance of evidence. The question becomes not whether guilt can be established to near certainty, but simply whether it is more likely than not that the accusation is true. For celebrities whose careers depend on public perception, this distinction creates an especially dangerous environment. Even without criminal conviction, even without proof that would satisfy a jury in a criminal trial, a civil case keeps the accusations alive. It keeps the name in headlines. It keeps the cloud of suspicion hovering over every professional interaction and personal relationship. Powell found himself trapped in a legal proceeding that could drag on for years, forced to defend not just his freedom, which the criminal dismissal had already protected, but his reputation, which no court ruling seemed capable of restoring. The sentence Hollywood delivered. While lawyers argued and judges deliberated, Hollywood rendered its own verdict. The entertainment industry, worth billions of dollars and built on the fragile foundation of public perception, does not wait for courts to make decisions. Studios distance themselves from controversy at the first sign of trouble. Producers protect their investments by avoiding anyone whose name might generate negative press. And actors who suddenly become liabilities find that the phone simply stops ringing. For Clifton Powell, the impact was immediate and devastating. Roles he had already secured began to vanish. Projects that were in development suddenly found reasons to move in different directions. Television appearances that would have been routine before the accusations were now being reconsidered or canceled outright. Powell recalled one specific situation that illustrated the cruelty of his new reality. He had been cast in a television show, expecting to appear in 7 or 8 episodes. After the accusations became public, his part disappeared after only 2 episodes. No explanation was given. None was needed. Everyone understood what had happened. The cloud of allegations hanging over his name had made him too risky to employ. The financial losses were substantial, but the emotional toll was even heavier. Powell described this period as the worst experience of his life since the death of his father decades earlier. As a father himself, with a daughter in her early 20s, the accusations cut in ways that went far beyond professional consequences. How do you explain to your children that headlines are calling you something you know you are not? How do you maintain relationships when everyone around you is wondering whether the accusations might be true? How do you walk down the street when strangers look at you with suspicion based on nothing more than what they read online? Powell maintained his innocence throughout. In interviews, he spoke with raw emotion about what the experience had done to him. "If somebody accused me of hurting them," he said, "I have a daughter. I would never hurt anyone." The statement reflected both his pain and his frustration at being unable to prove a negative, unable to demonstrate that something did not happen, unable to force the world to see him as he knew himself to be, rather than as the headlines portrayed him. The civil case wound its way through the legal system for 4 agonizing years. 4 years of uncertainty, 4 years of diminished work, 4 years of watching his career momentum collapse, while lawyers debated details and judges considered motions. When the case was finally thrown out in 2017 for insufficient evidence, Powell should have felt vindication. Instead, he found himself facing a strange and bitter reality. The courts had cleared him. Hollywood had not. The system that was always against him. The accusations and their aftermath were devastating, but they did not occur in a vacuum. Clifton Powell's career had been shaped by systemic barriers that existed long before any allegation was ever made. He has spoken openly about experiences that reveal an ugly truth about Hollywood that the industry still struggles to acknowledge: colorism. discrimination based not on talent or professionalism, but on the shade of an actor's skin. Powell recalled situations where producers or network executives dismissed him outright, not because he lacked ability, but because they considered him too dark for the role. In one particularly painful instance, Powell was told directly that he was so dark he might scare viewers. Think about that statement for a moment. An actor with decades of proven work, with an NAACP Image Award nomination, with over 100 credits demonstrating his range and reliability, was being rejected because someone in power decided his complexion was too threatening. This was not an isolated incident. Powell heard variations of this rejection repeatedly throughout his career, each time forced to question whether his years of training and his proven track record even mattered when the first thing people noticed was his appearance. Hollywood has long operated on the principle that marketability is tied to relatability, and relatability is often judged by how closely an actor conforms to Eurocentric beauty standards. In practical terms, this means darker-skinned actors are frequently excluded from leading roles, particularly in romance-driven plots, or characters that require audiences to identify with them sympathetically. Powell's talent was undeniable, but these systemic preferences placed him at a disadvantage that no amount of hard work could fully overcome. The contradiction was especially cruel. Powell was constantly praised for his ability to play gritty, intimidating, menacing characters. Directors loved his capacity to bring danger and tension to the screen. Yet, when it came time to cast a character who demanded sensitivity, charm, or vulnerability, his skin tone was suddenly considered a barrier. This double standard confined him to certain archetypes while keeping him away from opportunities that could have expanded his range in the eyes of the public. The typecasting also contributed to the cycle of misperception that haunted him during his legal troubles. Audiences were already accustomed to seeing Powell in roles that highlighted the darker side of human behavior. When accusations emerged, it was easier for some people to believe them because the characters he played had primed public perception. The villain on screen became the villain in headlines, and the distinction between performance and reality blurred in ways that worked against him. Powell's frustrations extended beyond casting decisions. Within the black entertainment community itself, he noticed a damaging tendency to criticize one another publicly, particularly in mainstream outlets already quick to dismiss black artistry. When acclaimed director Spike Lee made remarks Powell considered unnecessarily harsh toward another black actor, Powell responded publicly, stating that he did not respect anyone who would go to crossover press and put down a fellow black entertainer trying to succeed in the business. His stance reflected a belief in solidarity, an understanding that tearing each other down only reinforced the barriers that already made success harder to achieve. The demons he carried from the beginning. The struggles Clifton Powell faced in Hollywood were amplified by wounds he carried from long before his acting career began. Born and raised in Southeast Washington, D.C., Powell came of age in one of the most difficult neighborhoods in the nation's capital. Crime, poverty, and lack of opportunity defined the lives of young men around him. Friends and peers were constantly pulled into dangerous paths that led to prison or worse. Survival meant staying alert, staying disciplined, and finding mentors who could help navigate a world designed to swallow ambitious young people whole. When Powell was only 4 years old, his mother passed away. The loss left him in the care of a father who struggled with alcoholism and could not provide the stability a young child desperately needed. Powell has described those early years as a constant fight to stay out of trouble, a daily negotiation between the easy paths that led to destruction and the harder paths that might lead to something better. The men who stepped in to mentor him, the family members who refused to let him fall, became lifelines that kept him connected to possibility, even when everything around him suggested that possibility was an illusion. Powell escaped that childhood through determination and discipline, but the wounds of loss and instability followed him into adulthood. Like many who grow up with disrupted family lives, he sought comfort in building a home of his own. He married Kimberly Powell, and together they created what seemed on the surface like a stable family. But Hollywood's demands quickly strained the marriage. The constant travel, the long hours on set, the allure of fame, and the temptations that surround successful men in the entertainment industry. Powell later admitted that he was not present for his family the way he should have been, acknowledging that while he provided financially, his physical absence and emotional distance created gaps that money could not fill. The marriage eventually collapsed, devastating Powell emotionally and financially. He has admitted losing $5 million in the divorce, a staggering blow for a man who had worked for decades to achieve security. The financial hit forced him to rebuild at a stage of life when many of his peers were preparing for retirement. Adding to his troubles, Powell acknowledged falling into patterns that have ensnared many in the entertainment industry. Heavy gambling, between $30,000 and $50,000 a year lost at casinos. Relationships with people who surrounded him not because of who he was, but because of what he could provide. A lifestyle of constant spending and shallow friendships that created imbalance and vulnerability. The duality of Powell's existence became increasingly stark. Outwardly, he was a successful actor appearing in films and television shows that reached audiences worldwide. Fans saw him on screen as powerful, confident, larger than life. Inwardly, he was a man struggling to keep his family together, wrestling with financial losses and drowning in the consequences of decisions that felt exciting in the moment but deepened his problems over time. This dissonance between perception and reality left him particularly exposed when the accusations of 2011 emerged. The public saw a wealthy Hollywood actor. The reality was a man already under tremendous pressure, already fighting battles that nobody outside his inner circle understood. The truth that came too late in 2017, after 4 years of legal proceedings that consumed time, money, and emotional energy, the civil case against Clifton Powell was dismissed. Insufficient evidence. The phrase should have been liberating. It should have restored everything that had been taken from him. Instead, it arrived like a footnote to a story that had already been written. By the time the courts confirmed what Powell had maintained all along, the narrative had solidified. The accusations had been repeated so many times, in so many outlets, that they had become inseparable from his name. Search for Clifton Powell online, and the allegations appear alongside his filmography. The dismissal exists too, but it does not carry the same weight. Headlines about accusations travel faster and stick longer than headlines about exoneration. Powell's own counterclaims for defamation and emotional distress were also dismissed in 2018, closing the entire matter legally but leaving the personal damage unaddressed. He had been cleared of wrongdoing by every court that examined the evidence, yet he remained trapped in a reputation that had been shaped by accusations rather than verdicts. This is the heart of what makes Powell's story so disturbing. He was never found guilty of any crime. He was never convicted of anything. The legal system, which exists specifically to determine truth and assign responsibility, examined his case and found nothing to support the claims against him. But the sentence he served was imposed by forces outside any courtroom. Hollywood's memory is selective. The industry remembers scandal, even when scandal proves unfounded. Producers who might have hired Powell before 2011 had moved on to other actors during the years his case dragged through courts. Relationships that had taken decades to build eroded during the period when his name was toxic. The momentum of a career that had seemed unstoppable was broken, and momentum in Hollywood, once lost, is nearly impossible to regain. Powell has continued to work. His IMDb page shows credits in the years since the case was dismissed, but the trajectory changed. The calls that used to come regularly became sporadic. The roles that used to be substantial became smaller. The man who had been one of Hollywood's most reliable character actors found himself operating on the margins of an industry that had once embraced him. What Powell experienced illustrates a truth that extends far beyond his individual case. In an era of instant information and permanent digital records, accusations can function as convictions even when no conviction ever occurs. The legal system provides procedures and standards designed to protect the innocent. The court of public opinion has no such safeguards. Once a name becomes associated with certain kinds of allegations, that association persists regardless of what investigation reveals. Powell's final sentence was not delivered by a judge. It was delivered by algorithms and search results and the collective memory of an industry that values perception above almost everything else. He was cleared, but not restored. Exonerated, but not rehabilitated. The truth came out, but it came too late to undo what had already been done. Clifton Powell walked into a courtroom and walked out legally vindicated, yet the real trial, the one conducted in public opinion, had already been decided years before the law could intervene. Careers were derailed, opportunities vanished, and a legacy painstakingly built over decades teetered on the edge of oblivion. Can a reputation ever fully recover once suspicion has taken root? And what does it say about the systems we trust when rumor and bias outweigh evidence and truth? Powell's story is a stark reminder that justice can come too late, that perception often eclipses reality, and that the cost of false accusation is more than legal. It is human, irrevocable, and lasting. The story is far from over, and the questions it raises remain hauntingly unresolved.